Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. And in this video we are going to create and search recipe app. So in this app we are gonna use some of the latest and greatest tool in Android development. So we're gonna talk about one by one what are the things I will use in order to create this project. So first is modularization. So basically this app is a multi-modular project, and if you talk about modularization, we are having three different ways to achieve this. The first way of achieving modularization is feature-wise modularization. Second one is layer-wise modularization, in which we are having three layers: data, domain, and presentation. And third approach is basically the combination of these two. So for this project, I'm gonna use this third approach, which is the combination of feature-wise modularization and layer-wise modularization. So basically we are having a feature that contains three layers: data, domain, and presentation. So if you talk about navigation is difficult in multi-modular projects. So if you want to perform navigation, you can perform the navigation by connecting your module with another module. But the thing is, ultimately in future you are going to end up with circular dependency problem. So in this video I'm going to tell you what is the best approach to perform your navigation by avoiding this circular dependency problem. So I'm going to use here Dagger Hilt. So Dagger Hilt is a third-party library that is used to perform the dependency injection in your project. So I'm going to use that. If you're talking about our user interface, so for the UI I will use Jetpack Compose, because right now every project is nearly built up with Jetpack Compose. So due to this reason, we have a one feature in which we are going to save our RSP in our local database. So in order to achieve this particular feature, we are going to use here room database caching. So for this particular feature, we're going to create an app database, and within the app database we are going to save our recipe. So we will see where is the best place to put our app database, where is the best place to write our data access object and access our data access object with the help of app database. So we're going to see everything in this particular video. And apart from this, we are having one feature in which user can go and watch the recipe video. So for that I will create a separate module, and this module is called media player module, and I'm going to use third-party library which ultimately use to play the YouTube video. So we're gonna see what is the project that we're gonna create here. So first screen is basically a search screen in which you can type your recipe. Based on that you are going to see the recipe list, and if you click any of them you are going to see the recipe details, and the top of your app bar you're gonna see two different icon buttons that is used to save and delete that particular recipe item within your local database. And when you scroll down to the bottom of this recipe detail, where you can find out a text which says watch YouTube video, and if you click onto that text you will ultimately navigate to media player module where you can see the video. And when you come back to your search screen, in your floating action button, if you click on it, you are going to see the saved recipes that is present in our app database. And within that we are having sorting logic. So you can sort this recipe list based on their alphabetical order, based on the list ingredient, and third option is for the reset of these sorting techniques. And also you can delete that recipe item from your local database. So basically it's a full-fledged application. By the end of this video you are going to have a recipe search application which is not UI was good, but also performance wise it is optimized. So let's get started and create this beautiful application. So first thing first, go to the description box where you can find my initial project setup. Open it in your Android Studio. You will see something like this, and here I will provide you the dependencies that I will use in this project. So all the dependency you can find over here. After that we are going to create modules. So basically we are having two features. The first feature is our search feature, and second feature is very simple, media player feature. So media player feature is not a typical feature, it's a kind of functionality. So for that I will create a modules, and also in order to manage our common resources I'm going to create one more module naming common. So basically we have three modules here. So let's create the modules first. So go to the top, file, new. Here we are having a new module, and choose Android library and give your module name. So first I'm gonna create my common, finish it. Next I'm gonna create media player module. So choose this Android library and give your module name media player, and make sure this package name is gore.himanshu.media player. Okay, and simply finish it. Alright, so now it's time to create our feature module. So file, new module, and choose the Android library, and within this I'm gonna create a feature directory that contains our feature.
naming search. So basically here I'm gonna follow the hybrid approach of modularization, in which we have a feature that contains 3 layers: data, domain and UI layer. So for this search feature I'm gonna create a UI module, okay, and this time make sure your package name would be Gaur Himanshu search.ui, okay, and simply finish it. So yeah, we have search feature that contains a UI layer. Just like this, we have to create 2 more modules or layer for data and domain. So right click, new, here we are having module, Android library. Simply call this domain and go here, append search. Finish it up. Like this, just right click, new, module, Android library, and this time we are having our data layer. And make sure to use search here. Finish it up. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our modules. Now it's time to see the API that we're gonna use in this project. So I'm gonna use the milldb.com. So this will provide a lot of free APIs that we can use for this project. So specifically I'm gonna use this search API. So basically if you type any recipe, based on that it will provide you a list of recipes, of course. And if you want to see the details, you can use this API. It will provide you details of that particular meal or recipe. Cool. So I'm gonna copy this API and come back to my project, and we will begin in our project with data layer. So within this I'm gonna create few packages, of course. So first I will create dependency package, which is di, and second I'm going to create our remote package. So basically this will contain all the API stuffs that is dealing with remote data source. And like this we have local, so it will deal with local data things like room database or any other database that you want to use in this project. Like this we are having model. So yeah, basically here we are receiving JSON. Okay, so corresponding to that we will create few models, and we will map this JSON to our model, of course, and that is the use case of this particular model. So we will put our model classes in this package. Go to the Chrome browser here, and I'm going to copy this response. Okay, so I'm going to create model classes for this JSON response. So in order to do that, just right click, new. Here I'm using plugin Kotlin data class file from JSON. Okay, so simply paste this thing, and I'm gonna call this recipe response. Makes sense. Simply generate it, and here we are having our recipe response that contains a list of meals. So basically this object is used to transfer data from our backend to our user device. Okay, that's why we will call this type of model classes data transfer objects. So in order to make the separation with our normal model and this data transfer object, I'm going to change the name. So shift F6, and I'm going to call this RecipeDTO. Don't change the parameter meal. Okay, so we are having here meals, so don't change it, because if you change you can't get the response properly, because in the JSON we are having here meals. Okay, so due to this reason. Alright, and sometimes when it doesn't find anything from the backend, it will ultimately return null. So in order to prevent app crash, just initialize this thing with null. And one more thing, in our RecipeDTO there are few parameters that eventually or occasionally come null. So in order to prevent the app crash, I'm gonna add question mark. Okay, so I've done it. It's very easy. You can pause this screen and follow this question mark thing, which I have already done. All right, so now we are pretty much done with our model classes. It's time to write the API integration. So in order to write the API integration, we require Retrofit, because I'm gonna use a Retrofit third-party library to get the response from backend. So first thing first, I need dependencies in my build.gradle.search, basically build.gradle.kts. So we are having multi-modular approach. So each module contains its own build Gradle file. So here I'm using feature search data build Gradle, and just below to it I'm gonna add few dependencies, and dependencies is already present in Ellipse version toml. So implementation, we are having here Ellipse. First one is our retrofit. and simply press Ctrl D, and we are having here JSON converter. So this JSON converter is actually used to convert your JSON response into your model classes. All right, and we will use here dependency injection, or you can say Dagger Hilt. So in order to integrate Dagger Hilt in our project, I'm gonna add few dependencies for that. Lips Dagger, we are having Hilt here, and for its annotation processor, I'm gonna use KAPT. And this will not work with implementation, so we have to use this KAPT annotation processor. So in order to use this KAPT, we have to add few plugins on the top. So first plugin I'm gonna add for our Dagger Hilt, so Lips plugin Dagger, and for the Kotlin annotation processor, I'm gonna use Kotlin KAPT. That's it. So simply sync your project. Okay, so you will see error is gone. Now come back to our data module, and here in the remote I'm gonna create an interface. So I'm gonna call this Search API service, and within this I'm gonna write two API calls. So first one is get. Let me import this get first. Okay, suspend function get recipes. We are having here query, so let me just copy paste the API links. So now for the get recipes, if you look out this particular API, this is our base URL, and rest of the things is endpoint. So I'm gonna copy this thing from API to search PHP because this is an endpoint, so I'm gonna paste it over here. And here we are having query S. So in order to introduce query, I'm gonna use query annotation and pass S over here. This S is coming from our UI, or you can say user interface. All right, so the response would be response, and within this response we are having our recipe response. Okay, so we are done with our get recipes, or you can say get search recipes API integration. Now it's time to write the API integration for details. So in order to write the details API integration, just use this particular API point. Suspend function get recipe details, and within this we are having query, and this time query name would be I, and I'm gonna pass as a string. Okay, now the return type of this API would be, so I'm gonna make a different data class for this and call this recipe detail response. While meals list of recipe DTO. I mean, the response is pretty much same. It's not a different response, it's the same response, but the thing is now we have a clear separation of concern. Now come back to search API service, and here just use a response, and make sure this response will be coming from our retrofit package. So we are having a response, recipe detail response. All right, so we are pretty much done with our API interface. Now it's time to use dependency injection. So I'm gonna create one object within our dependency injection package, and I will call this search data module. So I'm gonna use installing, and within this I wanna pass singleton component. This is a class, and because this will represent a module, or you can say Dagger Hilt module, so we have to annotate this thing with module. Okay, now within this we are going to provide few things. So first thing which I will provide here is our retrofit. So provide a retrofit, so it will ultimately return retrofit. Let me import this retrofit first. So in order to return retrofit, I'm going to use a retrofit builder. So first the base URL. So as you know, in our search API we are having this thing as a base URL. So I'm going to copy this, come back to data module, and on the top of this module I'm going to create a const val and call this base underscore URL and paste it over here. And this base URL is used in this particular function. So yeah, we are passing base URL. Now it's time to add our converter factory, because as I told you, our JSON response is ultimately converted into our data classes. So this conversion will be happen with the help of this converter that we're gonna pass just. So JSON converter factory, JSON converter factory dot create, and lastly build it. So it will provide a retrofit. Now we will write the search API implementation. So it's not on us, it's on retrofit. So in order to provide the implementation, I'm going to create one more function naming provide search API service. Okay, and return type would be our search API service, and here we're going to pass retrofit as a function parameter, and we will take the leverage of retrofit and simply create our search API service implementation. Let me correct this name. It will provide the search API service implementation. All right, so we are pretty much done with our API integration. Now we will jump into our domain layer. So within our domain layer, I'm going to create few packages first. So first, the package would be dependency injection. Then we are having package for our use cases, and we are having our repository interface. All right, and also we are having here model classes. So basically, data transfer object is not used in our domain layer. Domain layer contain its own model classes, which ultimately used in our user interface, or you can say presentation layer. So I'm going to create two different model classes here. The first one is for our recipe, and second one is for our recipe details. So for that, I'm going to create a file, and I'm going to call this domain model file. All right, so I have created this two data classes. The first one is our recipe, and the second one is our recipe details. Okay, so in recipe details we have ingredients pair, like which ingredients required to create that particular recipe. Okay, so for this I'm using a list of pair that has a type string. Now it's time to write the repository. So I'm going to create an interface here, and this interface name would be search repository, and within this we are having suspend function get recipes. Okay, and return type of this thing would be a list of recipes. Okay, so this recipe is coming from our domain layer model. Second one is our get recipe details. So in order to get the details, we require ID of that particular recipe, of course. So it will give back recipe details. So we are pretty much done about this repository interface. Now it's time to write the implementation of this search repository. So where do we write the implementation? So well, I told you data layer is used to dealing with data. So here we are actually dealing with data. Basically we try to get the recipe from backend. Logically this search repository implementation will become from data layer. So due to this reason we have to create a different package for this. So in our data layer I'm going to create a repository, and within this repository I'm going to create one class naming SearchRepositoryImpl, and this will ultimately implement the search repository. Because search repository present in domain layer and data layer didn't know about anything, so due to this reason we have to connect our data layer with domain. So in order to do that, go to your feature search data, and here just establish the connection. So implementation project, and within this project first we have feature, and within our feature we are having search. So search contain domain, sync it. All right, so now connection is established between data layer and domain layer. Now go here, simply import this. All right, so now it's time to implement its member. So simply control I, and here you can find the override suspend function get recipes and get recipe details. So in order to make a network request call, we have to pass few parameters in the constructor, like private, while we are having our search API service. So this is actually used to hit our backend and take the data back. And one more thing, in the get recipes we have to pass the query, the search string. So actually I forgot that. So in our search repository I'm gonna use here S. Okay, so simply copy this parameter, go back to your search repository implementation and paste it over here. Yeah, I'm gonna use here search API service get my recipe back, and the query would be S, that is coming from the parameter as a parameter in this function. So I'm going to return this thing, but the thing is, return type of this search API service would be a response that contain recipe response, but the actual requirement of this function would be list of recipes. So in order to deal with this kind of situation, we have mappers. So mappers is actually used to map our DTO to our domain layer model. So let's create mapper first. We create mappers in our data layer. So right click, I'm going to create a package naming mappers, and within this mapper we have a file naming, of course, mappers. So it's not a class, it's a normal file. So here I'm going to create a extension function over list of recipes, and I'm going to call this to domain, and the return type would be a list of recipe. So here it's not recipe, it's recipe DTO, because we are converting the DTO into domain layer model. So due to this reason, okay. Now within this I'm gonna use map. I'm gonna create a recipe object. See, so in place of id meal, it dot id meal. Like this I'm gonna pass everything. Okay, so this tag and str YouTube sometimes comes null from the backend. So in order to manage the app crash, I'm gonna pass here empty strings. This will ultimately map our data transfer object into a list of recipe. So let's use it. So go back to your search repository implementation. So in response we have body, and within this body we are having our meals. Okay, and I'm gonna use to domain. So it will ultimately convert all of the list of recipe DTO into a list of recipe that is present in our domain layer model. But the thing is, there are few problems here. What will happen if this particular API throw any exception? So how do we handle it? So in order to handle it, we're gonna use a result class. So this result class is coming from the Kotlin itself, so I'm gonna use that. Okay, so in order to use that result class, what I will do, I'm gonna change the return type of these functions. So go back to your search repository, and here I'm gonna use that result wrapper. Okay, so you can see over here it is coming from the Kotlin. So simply use it, copy it, and similarly we're gonna paste it over here. Yeah, we are pretty much done. Now go back to your search repository implementation and just change this thing from list of recipe to result list of recipe, and similarly in the recipe details. Alright, so now I'm gonna use this result class. Response search API service dot get recipes pass your string. Okay, if our response is successful, then only I'm gonna use our result class and pass success, and success value contain response. We are having body, and within this body we are having meals, and ultimately I'm gonna use to domain. So it will ultimately convert all of the data transfer object into domain layer objects. Okay, so this is a case when we are getting success, and what will happen if I receive anything else? So on that occasion I'm gonna use result and pass failure, and this time we will pass exception. So you can pass any exception you want. So I'm gonna pass here exception with message error occurred. That's it, and remove this return statement. Yeah, so we are pretty much done. I'm gonna use a return keyword over here. The requirement is a list of recipe. The return type of this particular function is the list of recipe with question mark. So in order to prevent this question mark, I'm gonna use question mark operator. So response body, we are having meals. So I'm gonna use let, and this time I'm gonna use a result success within this particular block, and it dot to domain. And what if the return type of this API call will be null? So on that scenario I'm gonna use a run block and simply return result dot failure and pass exception error occurred. Remove this thing, and yeah, now it will work. Alright, so similarly we are having here get recipe details. So yeah, we're gonna use same approach. So while response use search API service get the recipe detail, pass your ID, and here I'm gonna use if our response is successful on that scenario, we're gonna do something else. We are going to return something else. So for the else I'm gonna return a result failure, and exception would be error occurred. And for the success case, I'm gonna use this same approach that we did for this case. So we are having a response that contains body, and within this body we are having mails. So if it is not null, then I'm gonna use a result success and pass our content. And what if it will null? So for that case I'm gonna use a run block, and I'm gonna use the result failure and simply pass exception which says error occurred. So for the success, of course, we require a mapper, because previously we are mapping a list of RecipeDTO into a list of recipes, but here the case is different. We are actually mapping a list of recipes with recipe details. Okay, so first thing first, we're gonna check few things. So if our meal list is not empty, then we're gonna proceed. Otherwise, if it is empty, then we simply return the failure. Okay, and if it is not empty, then on that scenario I'm gonna use it.toDomain. So it ultimately convert the list of RecipeDTO into list of recipes, but our requirement is a recipe detail. So how can we do that? So in order to do that, I'm gonna fetch the first element from the list, and now I'm gonna convert this RecipeDTO into recipe details. So in order to do that, we require mappers. So go to mappers, and here I'm gonna create mappers. So this time we have function that has RecipeDTO to domain, and return type would be recipe details. Okay, just create a recipe detail object, and within this you can pass all of the required thing. Within this I'm gonna pass these parameters. Copy this, paste it over here, because everything is same, but at this time we don't have it. We have this as a reference of this recipe detail, so remove this it. So the last parameter would be ingredients pair. Okay, so this is a tricky one. So in order to create ingredient pairs, we require different function. So I'm gonna just copy paste that function, because it's not a big deal. It's a very small thing. You can do it by yourself. So this is a function. It's an extension function over RecipeDTO, and within this extension function I'm gonna create a list that has a pair string comma string type, and within this pair we are having our string ingredients, and across to that we are having its measurement. So it's a very simple function. You can go through it. You can simply pause it and look into this. So get or empty function is actually check few things and return back. If it is a case of null, it will return empty. If it is not, then it will return the string ingredient. It's a very basic function, so I'm going to use this. So this dot get ingredient pair with its measure. So this function is actually used to convert a RecipeDTO into a recipe detail. So I'm gonna return this thing. Yeah, now it's fine. Go back to search repository implementation, and within this first I'm gonna use toDomain and wrap this thing with result success. Okay, so yeah, we are pretty much done. Remove this thing, and yeah, it works. Okay, so we are having two functions here, get recipes and get recipes detail. So what we did here, we are using a mappers to map our DTOs into a domain layer models. So this is the implementation. Now it's time to provide this implementation with the help of Dagger Hilt. So go to your search data module, and within this write the provide function. So function provide search repo, and the return type would be search repository. Ultimately you will return its implementation, and the requirement of this implementation would be search API service. So simply pass it. That's it. Now you are able to inject search repository anywhere you want. Okay, now come back to your domain layer, and we are done with our repository things. Alright, so now we will proceed with our use cases. So first use case is for getting all the recipes based on our query. So for that I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call this get all recipe use case, and within this I'm going to use constructor injection, and I'm going to pass my search repository. We are having here operator function invoke that has our query, and I'm gonna use here flow operator. So in flow operator I'm gonna use the type network result, and within this we are having a list of a recipe. Okay, so this is a network result. So basically this network result is used to transfer our event, our network event, to be more specific, from this use case to our view model. So now it's time to create this network result. So go to your common module, because common module is connected to all of our other modules. So due to this reason, I'm going to create here a package naming util. So this is basically a util resource. So I'm going to paste this class into this particular package. So in our utils, we have two classes. So first one is our network result. So I already told you what is the use case of this shield class. So it's a generic shield class which actually used to transfer our network event from use cases to view model. So this UI text is a shield class which actually used to convert your string resources into a meaningful string. So basically we use this UI text in our view model, and if we are using in view model this UI text, we don't need to pass context in order to access your string resources. So by doing this, our view model is actually unit testable, so we can write unit test cases for our view model. So due to this reason, we use this shield class UI text. And if you don't know what is this, then you can watch my this video, and in that video I'll explain everything for you from scratch. So let's continue with our video. So go to get all RSP use case. So this is not accessible because our domain layer is not connected with our common module yet. So let's connect that first. So go to your domain layer build.kdl, and here I'm going to use implementation, and we are having here project, and within this common, and simply sync it. Now go back to your get all RSP use case, and within this I'm gonna emit the first loading event that is coming from our network result, and then I'm gonna create a variable naming response, and I'm gonna use my search recipe get recipe function and pass my query. Now if our response is success, then I'm gonna emit my success event which is coming from network result, and within this data I'm gonna pass my response get or throw. So if everything goes well, it will return you list of recipes, otherwise it will throw an error. So if it is not the case, I'm gonna emit the error event. Make sure this error event comes from network result, and requirement of this thing is message. So I'm gonna use my response get, or here we are having exception or null, and get the localized message. Okay, that's it. Now if anything goes wrong except this condition, then for that I'm gonna use here catch operator, and within this I'm gonna emit the error event. So make sure this error event coming from your network result. In place of message, I'm gonna use the throwable message and pass it, and I'm gonna execute this flow on dispatcher.io. So for that I'm using flow on function and pass my dispatcher.io. Okay, so we are done with our get all recipe use case. Now it's time to create our detail recipe use case. So for that I'm going to create a different class, and I'm going to call this get recipe detail use case. Okay, so this is a class, and I'm going to use constructor injection here, pass my search repository, and similarly we are having here an operator function naming invoke, and this time we need to pass the ID. We are going to use flow network result, and this time we will receive a recipe details. Okay, and first event would be a loading event. I'm gonna create a variable naming a response, use my search repository get recipe details, pass my ID in it, and if our response is success, then I'm gonna emit a success event. So make sure this success event coming from a network result. In the data you can pass your response get or throw. So basically if everything goes well, it will return your recipe detail, otherwise it will throw an error. So if it is not the case, I'm gonna emit here an error event just like we previously did, and in place of message I'm gonna use my response dot exception or null and its localized message. Cool. And if anything goes wrong except this condition, then on that scenario I'm gonna use here network result error and pass my throwable message. And lastly I'm gonna execute this thing on my dispatcher.io. So now go back to your search repository implementation, and here we have to create few things, not create few things but actually modify few things. So this function body is actually wrapped with try catch. So suppose if anything goes wrong except this condition, then we have to catch it and pass the network result failure. Pass your exception here and cut out the return keyword from here and paste in front of try. Similarly we have to use the try catch for this. So try, and if anything goes wrong it will catch the exception, and I'm gonna use here result failure and pass my exception. Cut out the return keyword from here and paste in front of try. So that's it for our repository implementation. So now we are pretty much done with our data layer and domain layer. Now we will proceed with our UI layer. So first, in our UI layer we have to create few packages. So I'm gonna create few packages here in the search. So first package name would be DI. So basically this is for the dependency injection. Second, we are having navigation, and third we are having here screens. Okay, now within this screen we are having two screen, a RecipeList screen and RecipeDetail screen. So I'm gonna create here two packages within this screen. So first one is a RecipeList, and second one is for our RecipeDetails. Okay, and within this RecipeList I'm gonna create my view model. So I'm gonna call this RecipeList view model. This is a class, and I'm gonna use here constructor injection. So private while, and I'm gonna use get all recipe use case. So if you want to access this get all recipe use case, this is present in our domain layer or in domain module. So you have to add this particular line in your build.gradle.kts, otherwise it is not accessible. So basically I did this thing previously, so due to this reason I am able to access the get all recipe use case. And also I have added few dependencies. One is for the Dagger Hilt. If you notice in this build.gradle, you will see it's here, and also on the top I have added plugins. So due to this reason everything is accessible to me. So now you are going to use here event driven architecture. So for example, if user click any button, so it's an event. That event comes in our view model, and based on that we will decide which state we have to update or we need to update. For that I'm gonna create here an object, and I'm gonna call this recipe list. So within this object we have three things. First is the navigation, second is the events, and third our UI state. So for the UI state I'm going to create a data class naming UI state. Here we are having three parameters. The first one is boolean loading. Second is our error. So this error is actually a UI text, and initial value would be UI text.ideal. Lastly we are having our actual data, which is a list of recipe. Okay, and I'm gonna initialize this thing with null. So second, we are having here a seal interface naming and navigation, and within this, so what will happen when user click any of our recipe? So we will try to see the recipe details. So in order to show the recipe detail, we have to perform a navigation, and that navigation is present within this seal interface. I'm gonna call this data class that says go to recipe details, and this thing contain the ID of particular recipe, so that we will extract the recipe detail for that, and also use this navigation. So now it's time to write some events. So I'm gonna create here a seal interface naming event. So for the time being, just leave it. When we proceed with our video, we will see the events, and after that we will add that event within this interface. Alright, so now come back to your view model, and make sure to extend this particular class with ViewModel, otherwise you will not receive the ViewModel properties within this class. So I'm gonna create here a private while UI state, which is initialized with the help of mutable state flow, and within this I'm gonna pass an object of UI state. So I'm gonna create a UI state which is actually a state flow, and the type of this thing would be UI state. And I'm gonna use get here and initialize this thing with UI state that we have on the top, and I'm gonna convert this in a state flow. Okay, so we are done with that. Next we are having a function which actually used to search the recipe list based on our query. So I'm gonna call this search, pass our query here, and within this I'm gonna use a view model scope. So this view model scope is not accessible because we didn't have the dependencies for that. So go to your feature search UI build.gradle.kts, and here I'm gonna implement the dependency. So lips dot
lifecycle.viewModel. Simply sync your project. Now go back to your RecipeDetailsViewModel and now you will see it is available. So I'm gonna create a coroutine, and within this coroutine I'm gonna hit my API. For that I'm gonna use get all RSP use case and use this invoke, pass our query in it, and on each emission I'm gonna call this variable result. So when our result is loading, and we have two more, we have here error and we have here success. Okay, so if our result is loading, then what we are going to do? Well, we are going to update our UI state. Okay, and within this UI state I'm gonna create a new object of our UI state, and in place of is loading I'm gonna pass true. Okay, similarly I'm gonna copy this and paste in my error. So if anything goes wrong, so on that occasion I'm gonna create a new object of our UI state, and in place of error I'm gonna pass UI text. Here we are having a remote string and pass my message. So this message is coming from our result, and just convert this thing into string. So sometimes it may come null, so we have to prevent the app from crash. So due to this reason I'm gonna stringify that null. Alright, so again I'm gonna copy this from loading and paste in our success. So in success this time we will pass our data. So in place of data I'm using the result.data. I'm gonna use here launch in ViewModel scope. Remove this ViewModel scope.launch because there is no use for that. Yeah, so this is our API call. Now it's time to write some events. So the first event would be when user types something, we have to trigger our API. So in order to trigger our API, we have to create a data class naming search recipe, and we have to pass our query. This will extend the event. Okay, so this is our first event for the time being, and I'm gonna create a function for that. So function on event, and in this I'm gonna pass my event. The type would be event, and make sure this event is coming from our own ViewModel package. I'm gonna use here when and pass my event and complete the auto suggestion. So we have only one event for the time being, and I'm gonna use this. So it's very easy to use. You can call this search and pass your event.query. That's it. Now it will ultimately update our UI state, and we are able to observe the changes of this UI state in our composable and update our UI accordingly. Let me make this function private because we are not using this function out of this ViewModel class. So yeah, this is our ViewModel, and we are pretty much done with our first ViewModel, which is RecipeDetailsViewModel. Now it's time to create another ViewModel for our detail. So for that I'm gonna create a class, and this time I'm gonna call this RecipeDetailsViewModel. So this is a class, and I'm gonna use here constructor injection, pass my private while get a RecipeDetail use case, and make sure to extend this class with ViewModel so that we have all the properties of ViewModel within this class. Now this is same, we have a same behavior like just we did for our RecipeDetailsViewModel. So we have an object, and I'm gonna call this object RecipeDetails, and within this we are having event, we are having UI state, and we are having navigation. So first I'm gonna create a data class, and I'm gonna call this UI state, and within this we are having is loading, type is boolean, initial value would be false, second one is error, type is UI text, and initial value would be ideal, and lastly we have our data, and data would be recipe details. Make sure to import the correct one and initialize this with null. So similarly we are having here a navigation. So for time being leave it. Similarly we have events. For time being just leave it. Okay, so here I'm gonna create a private while naming a UI state. This must be initialized with the help of a mutable state flow, and here we are having UI state, and this UI state is coming from recipe details. All right, so I'm gonna create one more variable which is expose this UI state to our composable, and this is state flow, and type would be UI state. Make sure this is coming from our RSP details, and I'm gonna use here get and use my UI state and convert this into state flow. Now I'm gonna create one more function which actually fetch the recipe details. For that we require ID, and I'm gonna pass that ID, and I'm gonna use my get recipe detail use case, invoke, pass my ID, and I'm gonna use here on each, and I'm gonna call this thing result. So when our result is loading, error or success, so I'm gonna take this suggestion. So for the error, I'm gonna update my UI state with the help of UI state that is coming from our RSP details is loading event true, and I'm going to copy this particular thing and paste for these two cases. Reformat it. So for the loading it's fine, for the loading it's true. For the error, this time I'm gonna remove this is loading and pass here error UI text remote string result dot message, and convert this thing into a string. And for the success, remove this parameter, use data, and use the result data. And finally you can launch this thing in our ViewModel scope. Okay, so this function is actually used to fetch the recipe detail, and it ultimately update our UI state. Okay, so for fetching the recipe details we are having an event. So for that I'm going to create a data class and call this fetch recipe details, and I'm going to pass the ID. Okay, on the top I'm going to create one function naming on event and pass my event. So this event is coming from our recipe details, and I'm going to use when expression here to check the event type, pass my event. So we have only one event which is fetch recipe details. Okay, so if it happens I'm gonna use my recipe detail function and pass my event ID. So yeah, we are pretty much done with our RecipeDetail model. So make this function private because we are not using this function out of this view model. So now it's time to set up our navigation for this project. So in order to set up navigation in multi-modular architecture project, we are using different approaches because we can't do navigation by connecting our UI layer with another feature UI layers, because if we are trying to do so we are able to perform the navigation, but the thing is ultimately in future we are going to end up with circular dependencies. So in order to avoid this circular dependency, what we are going to do, every feature contains its own navigation subgraph, and this navigation subgraph is provided with the help of dependency injection. And we will take this navigation graph in our app module, because our app module contains the main navigation graph. So ultimately we receive this subgraph with the help of dependency injection framework, and we will connect this subgraph in our main graph. So by doing this we avoid the circular dependency, and also we are able to perform navigation wherever we want. So let's see how we can do it. So in order to do this, first go to your common module, because there are few things that is actually accessible by all of our feature modules. So in our navigation I'm gonna create an interface, call this feature API, contain a function naming a register graph. So as I told you, we are going to register our navigation subgraph with the help of this register graph function. So this contain the navigation graph builder. Let me add this dependency for navigation in our common module. So go to your build.gradle.kts, and here I'm having my dependency. So it's lips navigation compose sync it. Come back to feature API, and here we have navigation graph builder, and second we have a nav host controller. Alright, so now come back to your UI layer, and in this UI layer we have navigation, and within this navigation I'm gonna create a file naming navigation. This is a file, and within this file I'm going to create one interface which is specific to this particular module, and I'm going to call this search
feature API. So this will ultimately use our feature API, and just below to it I'm gonna write its implementation. So search feature API IMPL is ultimately use search feature API, and we are going to write its implementation. But the thing is, our UI layer doesn't know about this navigation graphs and navigation graph builder. So I'm going to my build.gradle.kts, and here time to add the dependency. So lips.navigation.compose, sync your project, come back to your navigation, and now it is available. So within this I'm gonna use my nav graph builder. This will contain navigation. So this navigation is ultimately used to create a navigation subgraph. Within this I'm gonna pass its route first, and second its start destination. So now it's time to create a routes for this particular navigation subgraph and also for our screens. So go back to your common module, and within this navigation I'm gonna create a file naming navigation routes. So this is a file, and within this I'm going to create a sealed class naming navigation route. We are having route here, and within this we are having data object recipe list navigation route, and in place of route I'm gonna pass recipe underscore list. Similarly we have data object for recipe details, and I'm gonna use a navigation route. We have here a recipe details, and in place of argument I'm gonna use name ID. So within this data object I'm gonna create a function naming send ID, pass my recipe ID within this, and it will ultimately return back the route. So route that contains recipe underscore details less the ID that we passed within this function. Now as I told you, this is a navigation subgraph, and navigation subgraph has its own route. So in order to create their route I'm going to create one more sealed class naming navigation subgraph route, and they contain their own routes. So for time being we have only one, and this is search, and I'm gonna use a navigation subgraph route, and in place of route I'm gonna pass /search. That's it. Come back to our UI layer, and within this route I'm gonna use navigation subgraph route. This contains search. I'm gonna pass its route. So our start destination would be coming from navigation route recipe list route. Okay, now within this we are going to use composable, and in this composable parameter would be route. So if our route would be recipe list route, I'm gonna render my recipe list screen, and if it is not the case, if it is a case of detail one, navigation route recipe detail and its route, and within this lambda I'm gonna use my recipe detail screen. I'm gonna provide this implementation with the help of Dagger Hilt. Within our DI package I'm gonna create an object, and the object name would be UI module, and I'm gonna use install in and install in singleton component, because this is a module, so we have to annotate it with module. Okay, so now here we have provide function, which actually provide this search feature API implementation. Okay, search feature API return the search feature API implementation. Cool. So now this will injectable in any place of our project. Cool. So we are pretty much done with our navigation. So now we will proceed with our app module. So first thing first, I'm gonna add few dependencies and also connect our app module with all of our other modules. So here I'm gonna use implementation lips.navigation.compose, and also I'm gonna use dependency injection here. So for that I'm gonna use lips.dagger.hilt. Just press Ctrl D, and in place of hilt I'm gonna use its annotation processor KAPT. So change this implementation with KAPT, and on the top I'm gonna connect this module with every module. So implementation we are having here project, and within this project I'm gonna connect first with our common module. Just press Ctrl D, and this time I'm gonna use my feature search. So search, we are having data, just like this we are having domain, and lastly we are having UI, and one more module we are having for our media player. So media player, okay. And on the top we are going to add few plugins. So lips plugin Dagger, and also in order to use KAPT I'm gonna add this string Kotlin KAPT. Now sync my project. Go to your app module, and within this app module I'm gonna create a class naming base app, and this base app is actually extend with the application, and I'm gonna annotate this thing with Hilt Android app. Go back to your app level Android manifest and add this class. Now I'm going to create a package naming navigation, and within this navigation I'm gonna create a file naming, of course, navigation. So this is a file, and within this navigation I'm gonna create one data class, and this data class says navigation sub graph, okay. And this thing contain first our search feature API. All right, now I'm going to create a package for our dependency injection, and I'm gonna create an object within this dependency injection package which says app module. All right, and within this app module I'm gonna write a provide function which ultimately provide me my navigation subgraph. So navigation subgraphs, okay. And the input of this is search feature API, and the return type would be navigation subgraph, not subgraph route. You have to choose your navigation subgraphs which is present in your app module. I'm gonna use a return keyword here, and navigation subgraphs search feature API. So in order to use this as Dagger Hilt module, we should annotate this thing with module, and also I'm gonna use install in singleton component class, okay. So now this particular thing is injectable. Go back to your main activity, and here I'm gonna annotate my main activity with Android entry point, and I'm gonna use here field injection let init var navigation subgraphs. All right, now go back to your navigation file, and here I'm gonna create a composable, and I'm going to call this recipe navigation, and within this I'm going to use nav host. So the requirement of this thing is nav controller and the graph. So in place of graph I'm gonna use start destination, and on the top I'm going to create nav host controller. Remember nav host controller, and simply use this thing here. And in place of start destination I'm gonna use my navigation sub graph route search route. All right, so now within this composable I'm gonna pass navigation sub graph, and I'm gonna use my navigation subgraph, its search feature API register graph function, and within this I'm gonna pass my nav host controller and also my nav graph builder. So in place of nav graph builder I'm gonna pass this. So we are done with our recipe navigation composable. Now go back to your main activity, and here in place of scaffold I'm gonna pass a surface, and this surface is actually having a modifier safe content padding, and within this I'm going to pass my recipe navigation. So the requirement of this thing is navigation subgraph, so here I pass it. So yeah, it's a complete setup for a navigation. So we are pretty much done with our navigation here. Let's rebuild this project and see if we have any problem. We will try to fix it. Okay, so we are having one problem, and the problem is our Kotlin extension version number. So it says 1.9.0 uses 1.5.1, but I think we are using Kotlin version 1.9.22. So in your build.gerald.kts, in your common module, if you check, it says 1.5.1. so convert this thing with 9, sync your project and rebuild this. Okay, so we are having one more problem, and I believe this problem arises because I don't have the plugin for our Dagger Hilt here in the project level. So I'm gonna add this plugin and again sync my project. Okay, time to rebuild this project. Alright, so our build is successful. That means everything is fine. So now we will begin with our user interface. So first I'm gonna create my recipe list screen. So for that I'm gonna create a recipe list screen naming file, and within this file I'm gonna create a composable. So recipe list screen, and within this I'm gonna create scaffold. Okay, this scaffold contain a top bar, so I'm gonna use top bar, and within this top bar I'm gonna use text field. Okay, so in place of value I'm gonna create a state. So remember saveable mutable state of, and I'm gonna initialize this thing with empty string. Use this query value here in place of value, and if anything changes I'm gonna update my query value. Alright, after that we are having colors, and in order to change the text field colors we have text field default dot colors. So I'm gonna change focused indicator color, and also unfocused container color. So unfocused container color would be transparent, and focused container color would also color dot transparent, and unfocused indicator color is also transparent. All right, after that we are having here modifier fill max width, and we are done with our text field. Now it's time to use our ViewModel UI state. So for that I'm gonna pass here ViewModel, which is a recipe list ViewModel, and I'm gonna use a variable named UI state, and use my ViewModel UI state, collect this thing as state, so that if anything changes we should update our UI accordingly. First I'm gonna check my UI state value. If it is a case of loading, I'm gonna render a box having modifier padding which is coming from this particular lambda, so I'm gonna pass it. After that we are using fill max size, and after that content alignment on the center we have circular progress indicator. Like this we are having error. So if error is not the type of UI text ideal, that means we are having problem, and in order to show the problem I'm using modifier padding fill max size content alignment on the center, and within this we are having text UI state value error get string. So this get string is actually present in our UI text. Go back to your recipe list screen. Now it's time to write our success case. So UI state value data, if it is not null, that means we are receiving list of recipes, and in order to show the list I'm using lazy column. So this lazy column have modifier, first thing our padding values, and after that I'm going to take the complete size. Within this we are having items, pass your list, and within this lambda you can pass your list item. So for the list item I'm gonna create a card. So this card having modifier padding horizontally 12 dp and vertically let's say 4 dp. Import this dp, and after that we are having shape. So I'm gonna use a rounded corner shape 12 dp. Okay, so we are done with our card. Now we are going to load our image with the help of URL. So in order to do that we require coil image loading library. We are going to add the dependency in our UI layer. So within our UI layer I'm gonna use implementation lips.coil.compose and simply sync it. Go back to your recipe list screen, and here I'm gonna use async image. Pass my str meal thumb. Content description would be null. I'm gonna use modifier fill max width, its height would be 250 dp. Lastly we are having here content scale. So I'm gonna pass for a time being content scale crop. Then we are having spacer here to use space, so I'm gonna provide 12 dp space, and after that we are having our meal name. So this meal name is coming from str meal, and in place of style I'm gonna use my material theme typography body large. Just after
that we are having spacer, having modifier, height would be 12 dp. And now it's time to create our tags. So if our str tags is not empty, then only we will render this UI. So in this UI we are having flow row. So this is an experimental API, so annotate our composable with experimental layout API. And within this we are having our it.str tags, and I'm gonna use a split function here. My regex is comma, so basically str tag comes in a form of comma separated string. We are iterating each of our tags and render our UI. We are having box, having a modifier, wrap content size, content alignment on the center, and within this we are having text, pass our tag here, and lastly we are having style. So material, theme, typography, style should be body small, and lastly we are having modifier. So modifier padding is horizontally 8 dp and vertically it's 4 dp. Our box is also having some shape, so for that I'm gonna use background color would be white, so color white, and shape is rounded corner shape 12 dp. Alright, just like this we are gonna use clip and pass our shape, rounded corner shape 12 dp, and lastly we are having border. So in place of border I'm gonna pass it with 1 dp, and then we are having color. So in place of color I'm gonna pass red, and in place of shape again rounded corner shape 12 dp. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our UI. So after this flow row I'm going to create a spacer having modifier height 12 dp. Alright, so we are done with our recipe screen. Now on the top I'm gonna create a function on click, and when user click our recipe item, then I'm gonna pass my meal ID from this function to our parent composable. So go to your card here, and after this padding I'm gonna use clickable event, on click invoke, and pass our it.id meal. Okay, now I'm gonna use this recipe list screen in my navigation. So here in my navigation we are having composable recipe list screen, so I'm gonna use a recipe list screen, pass our view model. So in order to pass it we have to create it first. To view model we are having here hilt view model. So this is not available because we don't have dependency for that. So go to your UI layer and add that dependency. So for that I'm gonna use implementation lips.hilt.compose.navigation. Now sync it, go back to your navigation, and here you can see it is now available. So import it, and the type would be a recipe list view model. Now pass your view model. Alright, and one more thing, I forgot to add this annotation hilt view model on the top of our view model, so you can do that. Alright, so we are pretty much done, and one more thing, in our Android manifest you have to add this to permission, because we are going to use internet. So in order to use internet we require permission, so use it. Alright, so now I'm gonna execute my app. So our app executed successfully, but the thing is our text field is not visible because I'm not using any kind of placeholder. We will do that, but first let's check out the functionality. So if I type chicken here, okay, so it didn't work. So let's go back to our recipe list screen, and here the problem is when user change anything, we are going to use our view model on event function, and I'm gonna send my event. So recipe list event we are having search recipe, pass our query dot value. Alright, and one more thing, we are forgetting to add the placeholder, so let's add this thing first. So we are having a text which says search here, and 2 dots, we are having style which coming from material, theme, typography, body small. Now execute this app again. Alright, so our app executed successfully, and here if I type chicken, you will see all the recipes based on chicken. But the thing is, a UI is not looking very good, but the functionality is working perfectly fine as we expected. So here if you see the tags doesn't have any space in between them, and also everything got stick to the left of our card. So we're gonna fix everything. So come back our recipe list. So here we are having recipe list, and I'm gonna close this thing. So first thing first, I'm going to put all the things except this async image and spacer, these thing into a column. So for that I'm going to create a column first, and this column is actually having modifier fill max width, and after that we are having horizontal padding of 16 dp. And now I'm gonna put everything within our column. And one more thing, before the fill max width, I'm gonna use padding. So this padding is actually used vertically between our text and this tags. I'm gonna create a text, and this time I'm gonna show the instructions, and I'm gonna use style which is coming from material theme typography, and I'm gonna use body medium. Okay, just below to it I'm gonna use a spacer and provide height of 12 dp. And now it's time to modify our tags. So within our tag we have box, so I'm gonna provide horizontally padding 8 dp and vertically 4 dp. Okay, and we are going to increase the radius from 12 to 24, similarly here and similarly here. We are going to add padding for this text, and it's already there, so I'm going to increase the horizontal padding, and vertically let's say 6 dp. Now when I execute my app, and I'm going to type chicken again. So now this time we are having our instruction too, but the thing is instruction is very big, so we're gonna fix it. But first thing first, we're gonna look out the tags. Yeah, tags looking good, it's not that bad. So come back to our project, and the instructions is actually have overflow. So I'm using here ellipsis, and max line would be 4. So now when I execute my app, it okay. So I'm gonna type here chicken. Okay, yeah. So yeah, this is looking fine. Okay, so when I see the tags, tags is also good. So yeah, we are pretty much done with our recipe list screen. Now it's time to design our recipe detail screen. So go back to our project. So first thing first, we perform navigation. So in order to perform navigation, we already introduce on click here, and ultimately we are receiving this event in our navigation. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use my view model on event and pass the event, which is not created yet. So go to my event, and within this event I'm going to create a data class. Go to recipe details and pass my id, or you can say meal id. All right, come back to navigation, and this time we are having go to recipe details, and we are receiving meal id. So I'm gonna pass this meal id. All right, go back to your recipe list view model, and here we have to use all the branches within our when expression. So yeah, it's done. Now I'm going to create a variable for the navigation. So private while underscore navigation, type is channel, and type would be navigation. So this navigation is ultimately coming from our recipe list. All right, just below to it I'm gonna create a navigation that is exposed to our composables. So this is a flow. Let me import this flow, this coroutine flow. Okay, and the type would be same, navigation that is coming from our recipe list. And I'm gonna use this navigation and convert this into hot flow. All right, so now go back to your navigation, and here we already created go to recipe details. Okay, so now go to the top, and here in the event I'm gonna use a view model scope and launch a coroutine, and I'm gonna send the navigation, which is go to recipe details, and from the event I'm gonna fetch the id. All right, so we are pretty much done with our things in view model. Now go back to your recipe list screen, and here I'm gonna create a variable naming lifecycle owner, and this is initialized with the help of local lifecycle owner dot current. and I'm gonna use a launch effect, pass my ViewModel dot navigation, and within this I'm gonna collect this navigation. So ViewModel navigation flow with lifecycle, and I'm gonna use my lifecycle on a dot lifecycle and simply collect the latest emission. All right, so when our the navigation, so let me use this suggestion. Okay, so we are having this branch, and I'm gonna use this branch, and within this I'm going to use my nav host controller, but I'm not receiving this thing from my composable, so I'm going to add this nav host controller and pass it from my parent composable from here. So nav host controller, pass your nav host controller. Now go back to your recipe list screen, and this time we are having nav host controller, and we are gonna perform navigation. So we are having a navigation, a route, recipe detail, and within this we have one function naming send id, and we are receiving id from our so it.id. By doing this we actually perform the navigation. Alright, so now it's time to design our recipe detail screen. I'm going to create a file naming RecipeDetailsScreen, and within this I'm going to create a composable naming RecipeDetailsScreen. Alright, so within this I'm going to pass my ViewModel, and we are passing a RecipeDetailsViewModel because this is a RecipeDetailsScreen. And first thing first, I'm gonna use UI state just like we did for our recipe list screen. ViewModel UI state collect as state. Okay, and here I'm gonna use a scaffold again, and this scaffold have top bar, and within this I'm gonna create my top app bar. So this time we are actually having top app bar. Okay, so this is an experimental material API, so we have to annotate our composable with this, and title would say the actual name of our meal. So ultimately it is a text that is coming from our UI state value dot data, but the thing is sometimes it may be null, so yeah, it is nullable. So I'm going to use here question mark operator and pass my str meal. Okay, after that I'm going to use two strings so that if anything goes wrong it didn't crash my app. Lastly we are having style, so I'm going to use a material theme typography, and body large is good. This is our top app bar, and now here I'm going to use our UI state value is loading. If it is loading, again the same composable that we had created for our recipe list screen. So modifier, padding, fill max size, content alignment on the center, and we are having circular progress indicator. Okay, so this is for the loading case. Now if our UI state value error is not equals to UI text.ideal, that means something goes wrong, and I'm gonna use again box, modifier, padding, fill max size. Lastly we have content alignment on the center, and within this we are having text. We are going to use our UI state value error and simply use get string. Okay, so these two are for our loading and error. Now it's time to write our main UI, for the success case. So I'm going to use here UI state value data. Okay, and this will ultimately return me a recipe detail. Yeah, this one. All right, so first thing first, I'm going to show an image, of course. So here we are having async image, and I'm gonna use my RecipeDetail.str mail thumb. Content description would be null, and if we are talking about modifier, so modifier is actually fill max width and height would be this time 300 dp. Let me import this dp. All right, and I'm gonna use a column on top of everything. So this is the column having modifier, fill max size, and I'm gonna use here its vertical scroll behavior, and remember scroll state, I think, yes. So this will ultimately introduce the behavior of scrolling within our column. So yeah, we are done with our async image that is present in our column. Just below to it I'm gonna use spacer to give space. So modifier height 24 dp. Just below to it I'm having my text, and this time I'm gonna use my RecipeDetailsStr instructions, and I'm gonna use style here, material theme, typography, body medium. Alright, after that I'm gonna add spacer, so modifier, height, let's say 12 dp. Alright, so now I'm gonna use my RecipeDetail ingredient pair, and I'm gonna perform the iteration, and within this we are having row, and this row contain an async image. So here we need to pass the image URL, but we don't have image URL, we have the ingredient name. Now I'm gonna write a function which actually convert this name into a ingredient URL. Alright, so this is a function which actually used to convert the ingredient name into its image URL. So I'm gonna use get ingredients image URL here and use my first. So from the pair I'm use first, and second is actually representing the amount of that ingredient. We are done with our async image, and here I'm gonna pass modifier, and within this modifier I'm gonna use background color which is white, and lastly shape which is circle shape. And also I want clip, so that if anything goes out of this shape we're gonna cut it out. So I'm gonna use circle shape. So this is our async image, and we have a text, and this text is actually coming from our pair second, and I'm gonna provide style from material theme, typography, body medium is fine. Okay, now it's time to modify the row. So I'm gonna use modifier fill max width, and after that I'm gonna introduce padding. So padding is horizontal 12 dp, and after that I'm gonna use here its horizontal arrangement. So horizontal arrangement space between. So just below to it I'm gonna create a spacer having height 12 dp, and below to it we are having a text showing that watch YouTube video. Okay, and style is coming from our material theme, typography, body small. All right, and just below to it I'm having one more spacer, and this time height would be 32 dp. So yeah, that's it for our recipe details. All right, cool. Now I'm gonna use this recipe detail screen in my navigation. Okay, and I'm gonna pass this recipe detail screen. Okay, but the thing is we need a view model, so let's create it. Well, view model, we are having here Hilt view model, and the type would be recipe detail view model. When you click it says pass your view model, so I'm gonna pass my view model. All right, now we are sending the mail ID from our recipe list screen to this recipe detail screen. Now it's time to extract that thing, mail ID and it dot arguments, and within this I'm gonna extract the string, and the ID would be ID. All right, so if our mail ID is not null, then I'm gonna use my view model. So we have to put our view model on the top of everything, and now I'm gonna use my view model and send an event. So this time make sure your event is come from your recipe detail. Okay, and here we are having fetch recipe details, so use it, pass your mail ID. So yeah, that's it, and we are pretty much done with our recipe detail screen. It's time to execute our app and see whether it is working or not. All right, so our app executed successfully. I'm gonna type here chicken, and I'm gonna click onto this chicken handi, and yeah, here I have everything. So basically this is our ingredients, so image is very big, so we will fix that. But the thing is, functionality wise we are doing everything perfect. So now go back to your project. It's time to fix our ingredient size. So to do that, go to your recipe details, and on the bottom we are having this for each iteration, and here we are having our async image, and within our modifier I'm gonna give the size 60 dp. All right, and one more thing, in the row I'm using vertical alignment. All right, and one more thing, I'm gonna use padding. So you can see our text is stick to the left of our screen, so I'm gonna provide some padding. So to do that, we have one way. So on that approach, we have to go in all of our UI element one by one and add the modifier, but that thing is not very good because it will take time. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm gonna put everything within a column, and I'm gonna add modifier and provide padding horizontally 16 dp and vertically let's say 12 dp. Alright, so now I'm gonna execute this thing again. Okay, I'm gonna type here chicken. Chicken spelling is wrong. Okay, chicken handy, click onto this. So for the time being we are receiving null here. So how should we fix that? So go to your project and in the navigation I'm gonna use here, and here I'm gonna use launch effect. So if our mail ID got changed, then only I'm gonna execute this block. Alright, so now execute our app one more time. Alright, so now I'm gonna type chicken here, click onto this, and yeah, we are having the details. And when you go on to the bottom, we are having problem because sometimes we are receiving string ingredient empty and its instruction is also empty in our pair. So in order to fix this, go to your RecipeDetailsScreen again, and on the bottom we are having recipe details ingredient pair for each loop, and here we're gonna check. So it first is not empty or it dot second is not empty, then only we are going to render our UI. So just copy this piece of code, paste it in our if block. Now execute our app again. Alright, type chicken here, click onto this, go to the bottom, and now you are not seeing any of the ingredients which didn't have image and the amount of that ingredient. So yeah, this is our RecipeDetailsScreen. And one more thing, we are not using content scale for this image. So due to this reason, this image is actually getting padding from the left and right side. So we're gonna fix that. Go to our async image. So this is the actual approach. This is a way developer actually debug their application. So let's put content scale crop and increase this 300 dp to 350, and now execute your app again. And here I'm gonna type again chicken, open it up, and yeah, there we go, we are having our RecipeDetailsScreen. So yeah, we are pretty much done with our RecipeDetailsScreen. Now it's time to introduce the caching feature. So suppose you like this recipe and you want to save it in your local database for future use. So how can we do that? Well, we are going to do that with the help of a room database. So let's get started the caching mechanism for our application. So first we are going to create a few action icon over here. The first one is for the saving and the second one is for the deleting from the database. So go back to your RecipeDetailsScreen, and here on the top we are having top app bar. Now this top app bar is having navigation icon and actions. So within this action I'm gonna create my icon button. Okay, this icon button contain an icon which is coming from image vector. Remove this painter with image vector. Icons default star, not search but star. Content description would be null. Okay, and similarly we are having one more icon button, and this time we are having icon that is coming from our image vector. Icons default delete. Content description would be null. Alright, so this is our icon button, and in place of navigation icon I'm gonna create an icon dot default dot arrow. So I'm gonna use here arrow back, and the content description I pass null. Okay, so what happened when user click onto this navigation icon? Then I'm gonna use here a modifier clickable event and simply pass this event to our parent composable. So to do that I'm gonna use here on navigation click And similarly we are having here on delete, and we are having on favorite click, and both the time I'm gonna pass my recipe detail. So make sure this recipe detail is actually coming from our domain layer. So I'm gonna use this recipe detail, simply copy it, paste it over here. Alright, so for the time being I'm not using this on delete and on favorite click because we will use this thing later in our video. For the time being I'm gonna use on navigation click. So on navigation click dot invoke. Alright, so now go back to your view model and here introduce a navigation. So before introducing a navigation, I'm gonna create few data objects. So first one is go to recipe list screen, and this is a navigation. Now I'm gonna create a private variable underscore navigation, which is initialized with the help of channel, and the type would be navigation. Make sure this is coming from our recipe detail. Alright, so like we did before, we are having navigation, which is a flow, and here we are having our navigation. Make sure this is coming from our recipe detail. I'm gonna use get here navigation receive as flow. Alright, so I'm gonna introduce an event. So go to your event and I'm gonna use data object, go to recipe list screen and use it with event. Now go back to the top and introduce the remaining branches. So for that I'm gonna use here view model scope launch navigation. So now I'm gonna pass my navigation. Okay, so this navigation contain the go to recipe list screen data object, and I'm gonna send this. Now I'm gonna use this thing in our recipe detail screen. So open this screen, recipe detail screen. Okay, so just below to our UI state I'm gonna create here lifecycle owner, local lifecycle owner dot current, and we are having here launch effect, view model navigation, and within this we are having view model navigation flow with lifecycle. Pass our lifecycle owner dot lifecycle, and ultimately I'm gonna collect the latest emission. So when our navigation, let me use this suggestion. So when it is a case of go to recipe list screen, I'm gonna use here the navhost controller, but I don't have navhost controller. So let me pass this navhost controller in our composable, and now I'm gonna use it here. So navhost controller dot navigate. So instead of navigate I'm gonna use pop back stack because we are coming through that screen. So yeah, we will go to the recipe list screen when we pop that. Alright, so we are pretty much done with the navigation stuff. So now it is time to introduce our room database. So in multi-modular architecture, the best place of putting your app database is app module, because app module knows everything regarding your project. Like if you have a lot of feature, then every feature is connected with your app module. So for me it's a best place to put our app database, so I'm gonna put it over there. So first thing first, we need dependencies. So go to your build.gradle.kts in your module app, and here I'm gonna write the implementation. So lips.room.ktx. okay, just control D. Next we are having the compiler, so add this and remove this implementation with kpt. Now sync your project. Okay, so syncing is done. Now go to your app module, and within this app module I'm gonna create one package naming local, and within this local I'm gonna create an abstract class naming app database. So this is a class, make sure it's an abstract class that ultimately uses a room database, and within this I'm gonna create an companion object, and we are having function naming get instance. Pass the context here, and I'm gonna use a room database builder. Pass my context and the type of this database, so app database class.java, and lastly we have name. So I'm gonna pass recipe app underscore db. So I don't want to use any kind of migration here, so for that I'm gonna use fallback destructive migration, and lastly I'm gonna build it. All right, so on the top we are having here database annotation, and within this we are having entities, and also we are having versions. So this is our first version, and I want my schema to not be imported, so for that I'm using export schema false. Go to our domain layer object, which is present in our search domain layer, and here we are having domain model file. Within this we are having our recipes, so I'm gonna store this recipes. So in order to convert this recipe into an entity, we have to annotate this thing with entity, but the thing is dependencies are not there in our build.getl. So go to your domain layer build.getl.kts and simply add the dependencies. So implementation libs room ktx, and just press Ctrl D and use its compiler with kapt. Sync it. Go back to your domain model file, and now here you can see it's available. So every entity has its primary key, so for that I'm gonna use primary key, and I don't want this thing to be auto generated. Now I'm gonna use this recipe in our basically in app database. So here we are having a recipe class. So basically we are having only one entity, so I'm gonna pass this recipe class. Alright, so now we are done with our database creation. Now it's time to provide this dependency or app database with the help of app module. So go to your app module, and here I'm gonna use provide function provide app database, and we are having here application context, which actually return the app database get instance context. So it will give me the instance of our room db, and make sure to add this singleton because I don't want to create this app database instance again and again. Alright, so now it's time to go into your data layer, and within this data layer we have created this local, and within this local I'm gonna create data access object. This is an interface, and I'm gonna call this recipe data access object. So this is an interface, and make sure to annotate this thing with DAO. So this DAO is not available because we don't have dependencies in our build.getl.kts. So go to your data layer and add those dependencies. So in the bottom I'm having implementation libs room ktx, and for the compiler I'm using compiler, and change this implementation to capt sync your project. Go back to your recipe DAO, and now it's available. Okay, so here I'm gonna use first insert, and having on conflict strategy replace. So basically if you pass the same id recipe two times, then it will ultimately replace the previous one with the newer one. Suspend function, and we are having insert recipe, pass your recipe. We are going to use its delete. So suspend function delete recipe, pass your recipe. Alright, so now it's time to get back everything from this database. So I'm gonna write a query for that. Select asterisk from recipe. So this is a function get all recipes, and it will ultimately gives me flow. So make sure this flow is coming from Kotlin x coroutine flow list of recipe. Alright, so we are done with our insertion, deletion, and getting all the recipe list. Now lastly we are having update. Suspend function update recipe. Although we are not going to use this update function, but for the sake of simplicity of the CRUD operation, I'm gonna create this update. So now it's time to implement this interface and provide it with the help of dependency injection framework. So now go to the app module, and here we are having provide function provide a recipe data access object. So for this we require the app database, and the return type would be a recipe DAO.
So a return keyword with add database dot get instance. So basically, in order to implement this recipe DAO, go to your app database and here create an abstract function get recipe DAO, and it will return me a recipe DAO. Go back to your app module, and now we are having here get recipe DAO. So we are done with the implementation of our data access object. So now it's time to go back in our recipe detail view model. Within this we are having few more events. So basically from the detail screen, user is able to add the recipe in our local database and also delete it. So basically here we are having two events. So go to the event sealed class and here add those events. So a data class insert recipe and pass your recipe details. So recipe details is coming from our domain model, and this is actually use event. Similarly, we have data class for deletion. So delete recipe wall recipe details, and ultimately it use event. So now I'm going to use this thing in our on event function. So here we are having two more events, deletion and the insertion. But the thing is, we are receiving recipe detail and the requirement of our database would be recipe. So we have to write a mapper class for that conversion. So let's do that within our view model. So in view model, I'm going to create a function which actually use the recipe detail and convert this thing into a recipe. So the return type would be a recipe, and I'm going to use here a return keyword recipe. Okay, so now I'm going to use this to recipe in my events. Within here we are going to use the use cases, but we don't have any use case till now. So first let me create the use cases first. So go to your use cases, and here I'm gonna create a use case naming insert recipe use case. So this is a class, and I'm gonna use constructor injection and inject my repository. So this repository is actually search repository. Okay, and I'm gonna use this search repository, but the thing is, search repository doesn't contain any insertion logic or any function that is used to insert our recipe in our database. So first thing first, go to your search repository and here add few things. So the first one is insert recipe, pass your recipe. Second is delete recipe, pass your recipe. And lastly we are having function get all recipes. So return type would be flow list of recipes. So now go back to your implementation, and here just press Ctrl I and implement all the function. So for the insertion we need the data access object. So here I'm gonna add the data access object, which is a recipe data access object. Now I'm gonna use my recipe data access object dot insert and pass my recipe. For the deletion I'm gonna use my recipe DAO delete, pass my recipe. For getting all the recipes I'm gonna use a return recipe DAO dot get all recipes. Alright, so we are done with our repository part. Now go back to your insert recipe use case. Now this search repository will have everything. So I'm gonna use operator function invoke here, pass my recipe within this. So it's a flow operator and the return type would be unit. Okay, so within our search repository we are having insert recipe, pass your recipe, and lastly execute this flow on dispatcher IO. Okay, so we are done with our insertion use case. Now it's time to write the deletion use case. So delete recipe use case. Okay, this is a class, and I'm gonna use again constructor injection private val search repository, and within this I'm having operator function invoke, pass your recipe, flow type is unit, and within this I'm gonna use search repository dot delete a recipe, and I'm gonna pass my recipe. Okay, execute this flow on dispatcher.io. All right, lastly we are having the get all recipes from local db use case. So again, this is a class, and I'm gonna use inject constructor private well search repository, and within this we are having operator function invoke, and I'm gonna use my search repository get all recipes. Alright, so we are done with our all use cases. Go back to your RecipeDetailsViewModel, and on the top I'm gonna use these use cases. So private well delete recipe, so delete recipe use case. Next we are having private well insert recipe use case, and I'm gonna use these two. So we are having the events, and first thing first, I'm gonna map our recipe detail with recipe. So within our event we are getting the recipe details, and I'm gonna use two recipe. Now it's time to use our use case. So this is for deletion, so I'm gonna use a delete recipe use case and invoke it. Now I'm gonna put my recipe within this invoke, and ultimately I'm gonna launch this thing in ViewModel scope. Just like this we are having insertion logic. So for that I'm gonna use insert recipe use case, invoke it, get my event recipe details, convert this thing into a recipe, and lastly launch it in ViewModel scope. And yeah, it will done the insertion. So yeah, we are pretty much done with our ViewModel. Now it's time to go our recipe detail screen and try to fill this on detail and on favorite click in our icon button. On favorite click dot invoke and pass your recipe detail. So this recipe detail is ultimately coming from our UI state value dot data. So I'm gonna check first whether it is null or not. So if it is not null, then only I'm gonna use this on click event and pass it here. Similarly, just copy this thing and paste it here. This is for the deletion, so I'm gonna use here on delete. And yeah, so all this event goes into our parent composable, or you can say in navigation, and within this we are having on navigation click, then we are having on favorite click, and lastly we have on delete. Alright, so apart from this we have to pass our nav host controller. Okay, so for the deletion I'm gonna use a ViewModel on event which is coming from recipe details, and here we are having the delete one over here. Now pass your recipe detail. Similarly I'm gonna use the favorite click on ViewModel on event that is coming from our recipe details, and this will contain the insert recipe, pass your recipe detail. Alright, so when user click onto the navigation button, I'm gonna use ViewModel on event, and this time I'm using the event go to the recipe list screen. Alright, so we are pretty much done with everything, the insertion and the deletion.
So now it's time to introduce our favorite screen. So in order to do that, go to this screen package, and within this I'm gonna create a package naming favorite. Okay, and within this favorite, first I'm gonna create its view model, which is favorite view model. This is a class, and I'm gonna use here constructor injection, pass my get all recipes from local database use case, and make sure to extend this class with view model. And here I'm gonna create an object naming favorite screen, and within this we are having our UI state. So UI state is loading is a boolean, initially it's false. Next we are having error, type is UI text, and initial value would be RDL, and lastly we are having our actual data, which is a list of a recipe, and initial value would be null. Now it's time to create events. So we are having here shield interface event, and within this, so basically in this screen we are having sorting logic, alphabetical sorting logic, then we are having less ingredient sorting logic, and lastly we are having drop down menu button, which is actually used to reset these sorts. So for that I am having three different events. So first event would be alphabetical sort, use your event. Second one is our less ingredient sort, use your event, and lastly I'm gonna use here a reset sort. We are having event. Okay, so these three events we're gonna use. And one more thing, if user click any of our recipe item, then we're gonna show the details of that particular recipe item. So for that I'm gonna use here data class naming show details, and I'm gonna pass the mail ID, and lastly use the event. Okay, so basically we are having 4 events here. Now it's time to use the seal interface naming navigation. So this is for the navigation, and here we have only one navigation. So for that I'm going to use here data class, go to RecipeDetailsScreen and pass the ID, and simply extend this thing with navigation. So we are having here our UI state, our navigation and event. Now go to the view model. So first I'm going to create a variable naming UI state, which is initialized with the help of mutable state flow. Initial value is UI state. Make sure this is coming from our favorite screen. Okay. Next is UI state, which actually used to expose this thing. So state flow type would be a UI state. Make sure this is coming from our favorite screen, favorite view model. And I'm going to use here get, use my top UI state and convert this as state flow. So we are pretty much done with our UI state. Now it's time to create a function which actually get all the recipe list from our local database. So I'm going to call this get recipe list, and I'm going to use get all recipes from local database use case, invoke it, so it ultimately gives back the list of recipes in the form of flow. I'm going to use collect latest, and in order to use this function we are going to use ViewModel scope dot launch. Alright, now it's time to collect the latest recipes from our backend and update our UI state. So I'm going to use here UI state update and pass my UI state, which is coming from our favorite screen, and in place of data. This problem is actually happening because it is also receiving from this collect latest and also from this lambda. So I'm going to change its name from it to list, and now I'm going to pass my list here within this data. Alright, so yeah, we are pretty much done. So in the init block I'm gonna use this get recipe list and convert this function to private function. Alright, so we are done with this, and next thing I'm gonna create a function on event and pass my event. Make sure this event is coming from our favorite screen. When event, so base I'm gonna use this suggestion. So in order to perform sorting, we are going to use one more variable on the top which actually holds our original list. So for that I'm going to create here private val original list mutable list of, and within this we are having our recipes. So here I'm going to use my original list and update it with the help of list to mutable list, and change the original list from val to var so that it is reinitializable. Alright, so now I'm going to create 3 functions for the alphabetical sort, less ingredient sort and reset sort respectively. So I'm going to create first function for the alphabetical sort, and within this I'm going to use my UI state update, use my original list, and I'm going to use here sorted by with. So we are having alphabetical sort, that means we are using our str meals. Okay, and this thing is actually wrapped within our UI state. So UI state, make sure to use the favorite screen one, and in place of data I'm gonna pass this. Alright, so this is for our alphabetical sort. Similarly for the less ingredient, so I'm gonna use here a UI state update my favorite screen UI state, and within this data I'm gonna use my original list and I'm gonna sort it by it.str ingredient length. Okay, so this is for our less ingredient sort, and lastly I'm gonna reset my sort. So in order to do that I'm gonna use my original list and update my UI state. So UI state update my favorite screen dot its UI state, and in place of data I'm gonna pass my original list. Alright, so these three is actually used for the sorting. So now I'm gonna use this thing. So in place of alphabetical sort, I'm gonna use this. For the less ingredient sort, I'm gonna use a less ingredient sort. For the reset, I'm gonna use a reset sort. And lastly, we are having show details. So for showing the detail of the particular recipe, I'm gonna create a private variable naming navigation, which is actually initialized with the help of channel, and the type would be navigation, and make sure this navigation is coming from your favorite screen, and remove this pair of parentheses with small brackets. Well, navigation type would be flow, and this flow contains the type navigation, which actually coming from our favorite screen. Alright, now it's time to initialize this thing with navigation receive as flow. So when our event is so detailed, I'm going to use a ViewModel scope, launch it, and in the navigation channel I'm going to send the element. So element would coming from our favorite screen navigation dot go to recipe details, and here we are receiving the ID. Alright, so yeah, we are done with our view model. So now we are going to create our favorite screen. So in the favorite package, I'm going to create a file naming favorite screen, and within this file I'm having a composable naming favorite screen, and I'm going to use scaffold here, and within this scaffold I'm having top bar. So within our top app bar I'm going to use title naming favorite recipes, and style is coming from our material theme typography headline small, and within this we are having actions, and within this action I'm gonna use icon button, and this has an UI icon default more word. So when user click onto this icon button, we are going to show a drop down menu that contains our sort list. Alright, so in order to show the list, I'm gonna create a state for that. So show drop down, remember saveable, and within this we are having mutable state of false, and second state is for our selection. So selected index is equivalent to remember saveable mutable state of -1. So initially it's -1. Remove this state saver because we are not going to use that thing, and annotate our composable with experimental material 3 API. Now when user click onto this icon button, I'm gonna toggle my show drop down value. So if our show drop down value is true, then I'm going to show my drop down menu, and in place of expanded I'm gonna pass my show drop down value, and when on dismiss request will invoke, then on that occasion I'm gonna toggle this show drop down menu again, and within this I'm gonna create my drop down menu item. So drop down menu item, in place of text I'm gonna pass first is alphabetical, and when user click onto this, then first thing first I'm gonna update my selected index value from -1 to 0, and after that I'm gonna toggle my show drop down value, and lastly I'm gonna use my view model events. So in order to use view model event, I'm gonna pass my view model, and here we are having view model on event, so event which is coming from our favorite screen, and here we are having alphabetical sort, so send it. Alright, so in place of leading icon I'm gonna use a radio button. So selection is depend onto our selected index value. If it is 0, that means it is checked, and on clicks things are pretty much same, so simply copy paste it. Alright, so this is for our alphabetical. Similarly we are having a less ingredient, so I'm gonna copy this, paste it over here, and this time I'm gonna change this text from alphabetical to less ingredient, and I'm going to change the selected index value from 0 to 1, and alphabetical sort now become less ingredient sort. Similarly here change 0 to 1 and alphabetical sort become less ingredient sort. Now simply copy this and paste it over here. This time I'm gonna use reset. So in place of selected value use 2, less ingredients now become a reset sort, selected value again become 2, and in place of less ingredient sort use reset sort. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our drop down menu. Now go to your scaffold content, and here we are going to use our ViewModel UI state. So in order to use our ViewModel UI state, on the top I'm going to create a variable naming UI state and use my ViewModel UI state and collect as state. Now in the content I'm gonna check my UI state value. If it is loading, then I'm gonna create a box having modifier padding is coming from the content of this scaffold, and lastly I'm gonna use fill max size, and the content alignment will be on the center, and within this we are having circular progress indicator. So this is for the loading case. Second is our error case. So UI state value error, and if it is not equivalent to UI text.ideal, then I'm gonna create a box having modifier padding is coming from the content padding values, fill max size, and the content alignment will be on the center. And this time I'm using text, UI state value error get string. Okay, so lastly we are having our success state. So UI text, UI state value, and if our data is not null, and I'm going to change the name from it to list. Okay, so if our list is empty, then the UI is pretty much same like error. So I'm gonna copy this, paste it over here, and change the text from this to nothing found. Okay, so if it is not the case, that means I'm gonna use lazy column, and this lazy column having modifier padding is coming from scaffold content padding values, fill max size. Now within this we are having items. Use this second one, pass your list, and here you can pass your list item. So I'm gonna use the same list item that we were using for our recipe list screen. So go to your recipe list screen, and here we are having the list item, this one. So I'm gonna simply copy it, paste it in my favorite screen. So here we are getting an error of on click. This is because we are not having on click in our composable as a parameter. So let's do that. So here I'm gonna use on click, and within this I'm gonna pass my mail ID. Go back to your list item, and this time it's fine. Okay, so this is happening because we are not annotating our composable with experimental layout API. So do it. And within our card item I'm gonna use box having modifier fill max width, and within this I'm gonna put my async image, and just below to our async image I'm gonna create an icon button which is actually having modifier of modifier, and its background color would be white, and its shape is circle shape. Alright, and within this icon button I'm gonna create an icon which is icon dot default dot delete. Content description would be null, and I'm gonna change its color to color red. Alright, so when user click onto this icon button, I want to delete that recipe from our local database. So in order to do that, go to your favorite ViewModel, and here I'm gonna introduce an event, so which is delete recipe, and pass my recipe here. Go to the top and add the remaining branches in our on event function. So in order to delete the recipe from our local DB, we have to add our use case, so which is private val delete recipe use case. Now just below to our on event I'm going to create a private function naming delete recipe, and within this I'm going to pass my recipe, and I'm gonna use my delete recipe use case, invoke it, pass my recipe, and launch this thing in our view model scope. Now I'm gonna use this function here, delete recipe, and pass my recipe. Alright, so our recipe is deleted from the local database. Now go back to your favorite screen, and here I'm gonna use a view model on event which is coming from our favorite screen. We are having delete recipe, pass your recipe. Alright, so we are successfully deleted an recipe item from our local database. Now what will happen if user click any of our recipe item? So we will navigate to the recipe details and show the complete detail of that particular thing. So in order to do that, go to your favorite view model, and here we need to add an event. Go to details, and within this I'm gonna pass my recipe ID. Use event here. On the top, add the remaining branches, and this time, and here I'm gonna use view model scope, launch navigation, send navigation. Make sure this navigation is coming from our favorite screen, and within this we are having go to recipe details, and you can simply pass your ID from event. Alright, so now go back to your favorite screen, and here on the top I'm gonna use my navigation. So in order to use our navigation, we require lifecycle owner, local lifecycle owner dot current, and I'm gonna use launch effect, pass my view model navigation, view model navigation flow with lifecycle. So I'm gonna use my lifecycle owner dot lifecycle and collect the latest emission. So it says navigation. So when our navigation, so we actually have only one branch for this. So in order to perform navigation, we require nav host controller. So after modifier, I'm gonna pass my nav host controller. Alright, so this nav host controller is actually coming from our navigation. So in the navigation we don't have a route for our favorite screen. So go to your recipe detail, and here we are having a lot of routes. So simply use a data object naming favorite screen, and within this I'm having my navigation route slash favorite. Okay, now come back to your navigation, and here I'm gonna create an composable navigation route favorite screen dot route, and if it is a case, then I'm gonna use my favorite screen. And within this we have to pass our nav host controller. So pass your nav host controller. Second one is our view model. So I'm gonna create a view model here, favorite view model, pass your view model. Lastly, we are having on click, and it gives me mail ID. So I'm gonna use my view model on event and pass my event. Make sure this is coming from our favorite screen, and here we are having go to details and pass your mail ID. Yeah, we are pretty much done with our composables. Now go back to your favorite screen, and here I'm gonna use my nav host controller dot navigate. So we are having here navigation routes for our recipe details, and use this send ID, and we are getting the ID from our navigation. So yeah, this is done for the navigation. So we are pretty much done with our favorite screen. Now it's time to navigate to this screen from our recipe list screen. So go to your recipe list screen, and on the top we are having a scaffold, and within this scaffold I'm gonna create my floating action button, and UI of this is actually have an icon which is star, not start, it's star. Let me import this. Content description would be null, and when anyone click onto this, I'm going to perform the navigation. So in order to perform navigation, I'm going to introduce an event here. So this time it's a data object favorite screen, and it's an event. Go to the top, add the remaining branches in your on event, and I'm gonna use view model scope dot launch and ultimately send my navigation. So in order to send the navigation, we are going to create a navigation data object. This time go to favorite screen, and it's a navigation. Go to the top and use this thing. So navigation dot go to favorite screen. Now come back to your recipe list screen, add the remaining branches, and use your navhost controller dot navigate. We are having here navigation route favorite screen dot route. Now it's time to execute our app. Alright, so we are having a problem. The problem is in search repository implementation, we need to pass RecipeDAO. So in order to pass RecipeDAO, just use RecipeDAO here and pass it. Execute the app again. Alright, so our app executed successfully, but when you click this floating action button, it didn't work. So in the floating action button on click, I have not added the event. So ViewModel on event, we are having here event. This is coming from our recipe list, and with this we are having go to favorite screen. Alright, now execute this thing again. Alright, so when you click onto this floating action button, ultimately our app crashes. So this is because our app crashed due to this reason. So actually I'm not adding this Hilt ViewModel annotation on the top of our ViewModel. Now execute your app again, and now when I click onto this floating action button, yes, we are going to our favorite recipes. Now go back, and here I'm gonna type chicken. Okay, chicken handi. I'm gonna open this detail and click onto this star button. Alright, come back, and when you go to this favorite screen, you are seeing that the item is saved in our local DB, but the thing is we are not want our delete icon over there. I want this delete icon in this right corner, but the thing is when I click onto this delete icon, it ultimately deleted. That means functionality wise it works. Now I'm gonna add a few more recipes into our local DB. Now open my favorite recipes, and here we are having. Now it's time to see the sorting things. So alphabetically, if I click here, you can see alphabetically it is sorted. Like this, we are having less ingredients, and if you want to reset it, you can do it. Alright, so functionality wise everything works. Now I'm gonna change this alignment from the left side to the right side. So go back to your project, and here in our favorite screen we are having a list item over here. So I'm gonna use modifier within our icon button, and I'm gonna use align. So alignment is actually to the end, top of the end, and after that I want padding of 12 dp. Execute this app again. We have a problem here. Let me see the problem. Okay, so actually I'm having the modifier already, so I'm gonna cut out the align function from here and paste it over here. Now simply remove this modifier from icon button and execute the app again. Alright, so go to favorite, and here you can see we are having our delete icon on the right side, but the thing is we are having a lot of padding. So in order to reduce this padding, again just cut out this thing and paste before our background. Now execute your app. Okay, click onto this floating action button, and yeah, now it's looking fine. Alright, so we are done with our favorite screen. Now it's time to create our media player. So for media player, I have already created a separate module, and we will proceed in this media player module for our media player. So in our media player, I'm gonna first create a few packages. So first package is for the navigation, and after that we are having our screens, and lastly we are having dependency injection. Okay, so first I'm gonna add few dependencies in our media player builder.kts. So here On the bottom I'm gonna add implementation for the YouTube player. So lips.youtube.video.player. Okay, like this we are going to use Dagger Hilt here. So go to your search data layer and simply copy these dependencies and come back to your media player build.gradle.kts and simply paste it. And on the top we need plugins. So just copy this thing, come back to your media player, go on to the top and paste your plugins. Alright, and also we need a navigation. So for the navigation I'm going to use implementation lips.navigation.compose, and I'm going to connect this module to the common module. Sync again. Alright, so now I'm going in my dependency injection package, and here I'm going to create media player module. This is an object, and on the top we have install in singleton component, and this is a module, so I'm gonna add this thing with module. Okay, and in the navigation I'm gonna create a file naming navigation, and within this navigation I'm going to create an interface naming media player feature API, and this ultimately use our feature API which is present in our common module. And just below to it I'm gonna write its implementation. Ultimately it will use media player feature API control I. Alright, so I'm gonna use my nav graph builder and use its navigation. Here we are having its route and start destination. So go to your common module, just control click onto this feature API, hit the target, and here we are having navigation route. So in place of sub route I'm gonna create media player sub route, and route would be media underscore player. Alright, and in our navigation route I'm gonna create here an data object naming media player. Ultimately it uses navigation route, and I'm gonna call this player slash the video underscore ID. So this video underscore ID is actually coming from our RecipeDetailsScreen, and within this I'm going to create a function naming send URL and pass my video ID in a form of string, and it will ultimately return me the route. So player slash video URL. So, remove this pair of parentheses because we don't require this pair of parentheses here. Yeah, we are pretty much done here. Now go back to your media player and navigation, and in place of route I'm gonna use a navigation subgraph route dot media player dot route, and in the start destination I'm gonna use a navigation route dot media player dot route, and I'm gonna use this composable route is coming from our navigation route dot media player dot route, and now I'm going to create my composable. So just click onto this target, and in the screen I'm going to create here media player screen. This is a file, and in this file I'm having a composable naming media player screen, and I'm receiving video ID within this composable. Okay, and within this I'm gonna use Android view. So first I'm gonna use modifier fill max size, and we are having here factory. So in factory I'm gonna use a YouTube player view, pass my context. Okay, and I'm gonna use here apply scope function, and within this we have add YouTube player listener. So I'm gonna use it YouTube player listener, and just click Control I, implement everything. Alright, so on the top we are having here lifecycle owner, use local lifecycle owner dot current, and within this apply scope function I'm gonna use my lifecycle owner dot lifecycle and add the observer. Alright, so we are receiving video ID from the composable, and in our onReady I'm gonna use my YouTube player and simply all the load video, pass my video ID here, and the starting seconds will be 0f, and remove these to dos, otherwise sometime it will crash your app. Alright, so now it's time to use this media player screen in your navigation, and here just paste it, import this thing, and I'm gonna fetch out the media player video ID. So it is coming from argument, so it dot argument get string, we are having here video underscore ID. Okay, so if our media player video ID is not null, then only I'm gonna use my media player screen here and pass my video ID in it. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our media player, the media player feature API implementation. Now I'm gonna use the dependency injection framework to provide this. So provide function provide media player feature API. So this is a function, and the return type of this is media player feature API, and I'm gonna return its implementation, which is media player implementation. Alright, so go back to your recipe detail screen, and here on the bottom you will see we have a text watch YouTube video. So I'm going to write an if statement here and check whether my RecipeDetails.str YouTube is not empty, then only I will show this. Okay, so when user click onto this, I'm going to navigate from the RecipeDetail screen to the media player. So in order to do that, go to your RecipeDetailsViewModel and add an event. So data class, go to media player. This is an event. Okay, because it's a data class, so we have to pass the YouTube URL. Go to the top and add the remaining branches. So we are going to perform navigation, so go to your navigation, and within this we are having data class, go to media player, and we are gonna pass the YouTube URL, and it's a navigation. Alright, so go to your events, and here we are having go to media player event, and within this I'm gonna use my ViewModel scope, launch it, and in the navigation channel I'm gonna send the navigation our recipe details. Okay, and we are having go to media player, so I'm gonna use it and pass my event YouTube URL. Alright, so now go back to your recipe detail screen, and in the text I'm going to use modifier clickable event, and in the view model I'm gonna pass my event. So this event is coming from our recipe detail event, and here we are having go to media player. Simply use your recipe detail and pass your YouTube URL. Alright, so on the top of this screen we are having a launch effect, and within this we are having navigation. Okay, so when it is a case of go to media player, then what we are going to do? So first thing first, I'm gonna extract the video ID. So this video ID is ultimately coming from our navigation YouTube URL, and I'm gonna use split operator here, v question mark, and I'm gonna take the last of this list, and I'm gonna use nav host controller navigate. From the navigation route I will choose media player and send the video ID. So this video ID is coming from here. Alright, so this will ultimately perform the navigation. Now go to the app module, and here we are having navigation subgraphs. So I'm gonna add one more subgraph here, which is media player API. Go to your app module, and here we are going to pass media player as a parameter and used it. Alright, so now go to your navigation, and here we are having navigation subgraph media player API. Now register this thing. So we are having nav host controller, pass your nav host controller, and in the place of nav graph builder pass this. Alright, so now it's time to execute this app. But before executing our app, make sure to add the composable dependencies in your media player. So to do that, just right click any of the package and go to activity in the gallery, create an empty compose activity, simply finish it, and once it's done you can delete this activity, and then after you can execute your app. Alright, so I'm gonna type here chicken, and yeah, here I'm having this recipe. I'm gonna click it, and on the bottom I have watched YouTube video. So when I click it, so here you can see this will play a YouTube video. So yeah, we are done with our app. We are done with every feature that we were discussed in the starting of the video. Alright, so we are done with this video, and in this video we have created a recipe search app which is full-fledged, and performance wise it is well optimized. Now if you want to say something about this video, you can comment it out, and if you like this video, then please click the like button. Apart from this, subscribe to my channel so that in future if I'm going to upload new videos, you will get the notification. Bye.